My parents texted me, "You weren't invited to dinner. Your brother's girlfriend doesn't like you." I had written them a $120,000 check that same morning. I replied, "Okay," then canceled everything. The text arrived at 4:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I know the exact time because I had just finished uploading the wire transfer confirmation to my email, $120,000 routed directly into my parents' business account, and I was standing in my kitchen making coffee, feeling that specific quiet satisfaction of a problem solved, the kind of satisfaction that comes from being useful, from being needed. My phone buzzed on the counter. Change of plans for Friday. That was it. No punctuation after the period, no context. My mother's name glowing at the top of the screen. My stomach gave a small, familiar clench, the same reflexive anxiety I'd carried since childhood whenever a message arrived without explanation. I told myself it was nothing, a restaurant change maybe, a time adjustment. I typed back, "No problem, everything okay?" The 3 typing dots appeared, then vanished, then appeared again. That hesitation, that specific loaded hesitation. I set the coffee mug down. The second message loaded. "Dinner is just for us and Tyler and Vanessa. Vanessa isn't comfortable with you there. Sorry." I read it once, then again. Then I held the phone closer to my face, as if the proximity would rearrange the words into something that made more sense. Vanessa isn't comfortable with you there. Vanessa, my younger brother Tyler's girlfriend of roughly 6 months. A woman whose last name I had only learned 3 weeks ago. A woman whose opinion, whose comfort, had just formally vetoed my presence at my own family's dinner table. The wire transfer confirmation was still open in my email. $120,000. Sent this morning. I set the phone face down on the counter. I stared at the tile grout. My coffee went cold. And then something happened inside me that I had never felt before. Not anger. Anger is hot and blunt and stupid. Not sadness. Sadness curves inward, looks for a corner to hide in. This was different. This was the specific sensation of a very long rope going suddenly, completely slack. I picked up the phone. I opened my banking app, and then I walked to my bookshelf and pulled out a manila folder I hadn't touched in almost a decade. By midnight, I had canceled $6,800 in monthly payments, revoked access to 3 shared accounts, and begun the most important phone call of my life. They called it an intervention. I called it a shareholders meeting. They had no idea those were 2 very different things. My name is James Wilson. I am 35 years old, and I am a senior lending officer at a regional bank in Charlotte, North Carolina, which means I spend my professional life doing one thing with remarkable precision, assessing whether a borrower is a good investment. I am, it turns out, catastrophically bad at applying this skill to my own family. I should tell you about the family first. My parents, Robert and Linda Wilson, built a hardware store from nothing in 1998. Robert was the kind of man who could fix anything with his hands and charm anyone with a story. Linda was the operational one, meticulous, organized, relentlessly focused on appearances. Together they built something genuine, something that worked for about 15 years. Then Tyler was born. Tyler came along 5 years after me, and from his first day of kindergarten, it was quietly, consistently, and completely clear that he was the son this family revolved around. Not because he was more talented, not because he was kinder or harder working, but because he was easier. He laughed louder, needed less, and never once made my parents feel uncomfortable with inconvenient emotional needs. I was, by contrast, the responsible one, which is another way of saying I was the one they didn't worry about, the one who didn't require investment because he was already producing returns. I got good grades without being asked. I applied to college on my own. I won a full scholarship to an art program in California at 18. A full scholarship, room and board covered. And I sat in my bedroom for a week drafting the email to accept it, imagining my life as something other than a spreadsheet. Then came the family meeting. My father had a brochure for a business program on the East Coast. Tyler's Big Shot, he called it, an Ivy League feeder school, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. "We can't quite swing the tuition," my mother said, gesturing at the brochure with the reverence usually reserved for sacred text. "Family is about sacrifice, son," my father said. "You invest in the family, and the family invests in you. It's a promise." I was 18 years old. I believed him. I deferred my dream. I enrolled in a practical finance program. I got a practical degree and a practical job, and I began, slowly and methodically, building a life that was useful to everyone except myself. And the investment began. It started small, helping Tyler with textbook costs in his second year. covering an overdraft here, a car payment there. The amounts grew gradually enough that I never felt the full weight of any single one. That's how it works. I've learned since. Financial exploitation at the family level is never a sudden robbery. It's a slow, comfortable hemorrhage. By the time I turned 30, the payments were structural. $2,500 a month directly into Tyler's account. Rent and expenses, he was 25, then 26, then 27. He made noises about getting on his feet the way people make noises about joining a gym, with great sincerity and zero follow-through. My father's truck lease, $680 a month. Needed for the business, he said, though George, the store's longtime manager, once mentioned quietly that Robert hadn't made a delivery run in 2 years. My mother's credit card, the little emergency card, with a $4,000 limit that was perpetually at $3,900, perpetually being refilled by me. The family cell plan, 4 lines, 1 bill, and a monthly transfer into my parents' retirement account because someone had to think about their future, and the someone they had in mind was apparently me. I had been running this tab for a decade. I never added it up because I was afraid of what the total would tell me about my own complicity. The morning I wired them the $120,000, a capital injection to save the failing gift shop they'd opened as an expansion of the hardware business, I finally, for the first time, opened a spreadsheet and did the math. Total financial support provided to family members over 10 years, $847,000. I stared at the number for a long time. Then my mother's text arrived, and I understood, with a clarity that felt almost surgical, exactly what that number had purchased. Not love, not membership, not even a seat at the dinner table. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my apartment in the dark, surrounded by furniture I'd bought my parents 2 birthdays ago as a just because gift. A sofa nearly identical to the one they now sat on while coordinating my exclusion. The irony of sitting on my own generosity while being uninvited from their home was not lost on me. My cousin Emma texted around 9 p.m. She was a pediatric nurse, the most grounded person in the extended family, the kind of woman who saw straight through performance to the actual human underneath and responded accordingly. Hey you, my mom just posted pictures of the new decorations at the store. Said they're getting ready for a big family dinner Friday. I figured you'd be there, was going to ask you to say hi for me. I stared at that text for a full minute. They hadn't told anyone I was excluded. They had simply erased me from the narrative, the way you cut a character from a second draft without noting the deletion. I was just gone, and the story continued without a gap. I thought about that Sunday barbecue 3 months earlier. Vanessa, Tyler's girlfriend, had listened to me describe a complex commercial loan deal I'd closed, the biggest of my career, with a small, practiced smile before cutting in, loudly enough for the whole table to hear. Wow, James, it must be so nice to just be able to write checks for whatever anyone needs. The table went quiet. My face went hot. That's not what it's about, I said. My mother had immediately moved to Vanessa's side, patting her arm like she was soothing a startled animal. Oh, honey, don't mind James, she'd said, not to me but about me in the third person, while I sat 3 feet away. He gets so intense about his job. Then she'd turned to me with that expression, the one she reserved for moments when my emotions were an inconvenience. James, honestly, she was just complimenting you. Don't be so sensitive. She'd chosen a stranger, in public, over her own son. I went to the bookshelf and found the folder, Davis and Associates, Wilson and Sons Enterprise Partnership Agreement. Howard Davis had been our family attorney for years before quietly stepping back from my parents' affairs around 2019. I'd always assumed it was the semi-retirement he'd mentioned. Later, I would learn it was because he didn't like the direction my father was heading and had professional scruples about enabling it. He had drawn up this partnership agreement in 2015 when my father's hardware store was 3 months from foreclosure and my parents were 2 weeks from losing their house. My father had wanted a gift, then he'd wanted a loan. Howard had refused both. What Howard had given me instead, without ever explaining why, was a 51% controlling stake in Wilson & Sons Enterprise Corporation in exchange for my $80,000 capital injection. I hadn't thought about that document in years. I thought about it now. I opened my banking app. The cursor hovered over the first payment. Cancel. For 30 seconds, the old panic rose. The animal fear of abandonment, the deep-grooved terror of being cut off, of choosing freedom over belonging. My hand actually trembled. Then I thought about the dinner they were having without me, the decorations going up, the table being set, 4 chairs, no fifth. My hand steadied. Click, cancel, confirm. A small green check mark appeared. The sound it made in my apartment, in the silence of that kitchen, was the loudest quiet I'd ever heard. I moved down the list. Tyler's rent and expenses, gone. My mother's credit card, gone. My father's truck lease, gone. The family cell plan, gone. The retirement contribution, gone. 12 minutes. $6,800 a month. A decade of financial infrastructure, dismantled before midnight. I texted Emma back, "Funny you should mention dinner. Turns out I had a change of plans. A big one." Then I picked up the manila folder, opened my laptop, and began to read the document I had signed a decade ago without fully understanding what it meant. By 2 a.m., I understood it completely. I called Howard Davis's office and left a message asking for the earliest possible appointment. I went to sleep for the first time in years without anything scheduled to pay in the morning. The first crack of thunder hit at 9:15 a.m. Tyler called. I let it ring 4 times before answering, setting it on speaker on the kitchen counter while I made a fresh cup of coffee. "James, what the hell is going on?" No greeting. His voice was thin and high in a way I'd never heard before, the voice of someone whose floor has just dropped away. "Good morning, Tyler. My landlord called, Mr. Henderson. The rent payment was declined. He's threatening a $100 late fee." "That sounds stressful," I said, and took a deliberate sip. The silence that followed was the sound of a man whose entire model of reality was failing a stress test. "Did you forget to pay it?" He said it the way you say, "Did the sun forget to rise?" Not a real question, just a placeholder while his brain rebooted. "No, I canceled it." A pause, a sharp inhale. "On purpose?" "On purpose." "Why?" he shrieked, the word tearing out of him. "My car insurance is due Monday. That comes out of my checking account, which is going to be completely empty. What am I supposed to do?" "That sounds like a personal finance issue," I said calmly. "I'm sure there are books." I heard Vanessa's voice in the background. Sharp, venomous. "What is he saying? Ask him what's wrong with him." Tyler's voice shifted, absorbing her outrage like a sponge. "You know what? This is about the dinner, isn't it? God, James, grow up. She was just feeling a little overwhelmed. She wanted a quiet night, and you're really going to blow up our lives over something so petty?" Petty. The word landed with a kind of clarifying force, like a chemical reaction that finally produces the compound you were trying to make. "Goodbye, Tyler," I said, and ended the call, and blocked his number in the same motion. My father called at 10:40 a.m. His voice was cold and controlled, the register he used for underperforming employees. "Your mother's card was declined at the supermarket. She had a full cart. She had to leave it there. She has a debit card linked to her own account," I said. "An account that is empty," he said, his voice rising, "because we have been putting everything into the new store. An investment you are a partner in. The mortgage payment on the store property is due in 3 days, James. You will handle it as we agreed." "The agreement," I said softly, "is exactly what I want to talk about. There is nothing to talk about. You are a son. You have a duty. I was a bank, Dad. There's a difference." He hung up. My mother called at 2:18 p.m. She was already crying. That was her opening move. She had weaponized tears with the strategic precision of a general, deploying them at the exact moment the enemy needed to advance to freeze him in place. "James, honey, please, what is happening? What did we do?" "I'm not doing anything, Mom. I'm just stopping." "But why?" she wept. "We're family. Families help each other." "Whose idea was it?" I asked, cutting through the performance. "The dinner. Whose idea was it to tell me not to come?" Silence. Then the tears, which had been flowing freely, stopped with a suddenness that told me everything I needed to know about their authenticity. Her voice, when it came back, was clipped and sharp and defensive. "Fine. It was Vanessa. She feels you're possessive. She warned me that if we ever stood up to you, you'd do exactly this. You'd try to ruin us, to punish us." A bitter pause. "And you know what? She was right. She saw right through you." There it was. They hadn't just disinvited me. They had been coached. Vanessa had preemptively written the narrative, cast me as the villain, and handed my mother the script. And my mother had memorized every line. "Thank you, Mom," I said, my voice emptied of all inflection. "You've made everything perfectly clear." I hung up. An hour later, my father called back. His voice had changed register again. Now it was the general issuing a command, not a request. "Family meeting. Friday night. Your Aunt Carol will be there. You will attend, and we will put an end to this." "I'll be there," I said. "There are a few things I'd like to put an end to as well." As I hung up, I looked at the manila folder on my desk, and I felt something I hadn't felt in 35 years of trying to be useful enough to be loved. Ready. I walked into Howard Davis's office on Thursday afternoon at 3 p.m. Howard was 71 years old, dressed in a tweed jacket that smelled of old paper and quiet competence. He had the unhurried manner of a man who had watched enough human chaos to stop being surprised by any of it. His office on the 14th floor of a building downtown overlooked a city that was, at any given moment, full of families destroying each other over money. He greeted me with a handshake and eyes that already knew why I was there. "James," he said, lowering himself into his chair, "when your name appeared on my schedule next to the words partnership agreement, I suspected this wasn't a social call." "Howard," I said, and slid the folder across his mahogany desk. "I need to know exactly what this document empowers me to do. No ambiguity. the complete picture. He didn't need to read it. He knew it by heart. He had written it, after all. "Do you remember that day?" he asked, his voice careful. "May 2015. Your father wanted a gift. I refused. He wanted a loan. I refused that too." I shook my head. "I remember signing it. I remember being desperate to stop the store from closing. I would have signed anything." "I know," he said, and something in his tone carried the weight of a man who had made a deliberate, calculated choice on my behalf. "That's precisely why I drew it up this way." He leaned forward, his reading glasses glinting. "James, I have been practicing law for 40 years. I have seen more families destroyed by money than by any other single force. I saw the dynamic in your household. I saw how much you gave and how little came back." He paused. "This document wasn't just a legal agreement. It was a life raft. I simply hoped you'd reach for it before you drowned." He opened the folder to a page he found without searching and placed his finger on a paragraph. "The 51% controlling stake is ironclad. You are the majority partner. You have final authority over all financial decisions, all operational matters, and the hiring and dismissal of all personnel, including minority partners." He looked up. "The new gift shop, as a business entity, is a subsidiary of the original Wilson & Sons Enterprise Corporation. You own 51% of all of it: the name, the inventory, the lease, the cash register. Every physical and legal component of that business belongs in the majority to you." I let the information reorganize itself inside my chest. "So I'm not a silent partner," I said. "You are the silent owner," Howard said. "They've been running your company for 10 years. He leaned back. "What do you intend to do?" "They've called a family intervention for Friday night," I said. Howard allowed himself a thin, precisely calibrated smile. "An unscheduled shareholders meeting then." He was already reaching for his dictaphone. "I'll have a formal declaration on my letterhead, notarized, stamped, in language so plain there's no room for argument. You can pick it up tomorrow morning." I stood, and we shook hands, and I walked out into the late afternoon sun feeling like my spine had been replaced with something that didn't bend. That evening, Emma arrived at my apartment with a 6-pack of my favorite IPA and a pizza, and the specific gift of a person who shows up without requiring an explanation. We sat on the floor and ate from the box, and I told her everything. Her eyes went wide at the 51%. "You've been holding the winning hand this whole time," she said. "I just never wanted to play it," I admitted. "I kept hoping I'd never have to." She grew quiet, turning her beer bottle in her hands. "You know, at Tyler's 10th birthday, my mom made that chocolate cake, the big one. Your mom cut the slices." She paused. "She gave Tyler the corner piece with the giant frosting rose. She gave you this tiny sliver from the middle, and she said," Emma's voice dropped into a gentle, unconscious impression, "James doesn't mind. He's such a good boy." The memory was so small, so perfectly small. A tiny sliver of cake. A text message telling me not to come to dinner. The same story, just with more zeros. "They're going to make this about your character," Emma said, her voice serious. "They'll call you cold, broken, selfish. They'll gaslight you into thinking you're the unstable one." "I know," I said. "Let them try." When she left, she held me for a moment at the door. "You are not a sliver of cake, James," she whispered. "You are the whole damn bakery. Don't you forget it." I closed the door. The board was set, every piece in position. One more day. I parked on the street, not in the driveway. On the street, 2 houses down, as if this were a meeting I could leave under my own terms, because it was. The manila folder in my hand felt like a sealed verdict. I rang the doorbell, and my father opened it almost immediately, which told me he'd been waiting just behind it, positioned for authority, for control of the first impression. "James," his voice was a low rumble. "You're here. Get in." The living room had been arranged with the specific geometry of a tribunal. My father in his leather armchair, his throne, always his throne. My mother on the sofa edge, tissue in hand. Tyler and Vanessa fused together in the middle cushion, Tyler's arm draped over her shoulders like a territorial flag. And Aunt Carol, my father's sister, perched in a dining chair that had been dragged into the circle, the imported artillery. There was one chair left, wooden, straight-backed, placed directly opposite them all like a witness stand. They'd thought of everything. "You're late," my father said. I checked my watch. "I'm on time." I sat. I placed the folder on the coffee table in front of me. I folded my hands. I said nothing. My father leaned forward with the practiced gravity of a man who has rehearsed this speech. "We are here because we love you and because your behavior has been deeply hurtful. You've caused sleepless nights. You've put your brother's stability at risk. You've shown a shocking lack of gratitude for everything this family has provided." Aunt Carol Carol cut in, unable to wait. It's more than ingratitude, Robert. It's pathological. We all know James has always been the dramatic one. But this cold, punishing streak to hold money over your own family after everything they've given you. My mother's sob arrived right on cue. Tyler went next. She's the kindest person I've ever met. You just can't stand to see me happy. This is about control. It's always been about control with you. Vanessa sat with the studied composure of a woman who knew the cameras, metaphorically speaking, were on her. She dabbed at her eye. She looked at the floor. The performance was impeccable. They went on. I let the words wash past me. I had spent 35 years allowing the emotional climate of this family to determine my internal weather. I had absorbed their interpretations of me as if they were facts, flinched from their disappointment, contorted myself into whatever shape their comfort required. Tonight I was bedrock, immovable, just waiting. They wound down eventually, the way storms wind down. The accusations hung in the air, spent. The room went quiet, and they all looked at me with the combined expectation of people who have set a trap and are waiting for the snap. I let the silence expand. Then I took a slow breath. "Are you finished?" I asked. My father's eyes narrowed. "We are finished when you stop this tantrum and act like a son again." "A son," I said, "or a bank. There's a difference. Don't be insolent. The business," I said, and something in my voice made him stop. "Let's talk about the business." I was hoping we'd get there. I reached forward and placed the folder on the table. The crisp, decisive sound of it landing made every person in that room flinch. "What is that?" Aunt Carol's voice was sharp. "A partnership agreement," I said. "May 14th, 2015. The day I provided $80,000 to prevent the foreclosure of Wilson & Sons Enterprise." I looked at my father. "Do you remember it?" His jaw tightened. "That was a family loan." "No," I said, quietly and with absolute precision. "It was not. My lawyer, Howard Davis, 40 years of practice, the same man who drafted your original business incorporation, insisted on a formal equity structure. You signed it. There's a notary seal and your signature on page 6. I slid the top document toward him. "Your own handwriting." I opened the folder and removed the letterhead declaration from Howard's office. Official, embossed, notarized, and placed it in the center of the coffee table like a stone placed on a grave. "The relevant section," I said, and read it aloud. "In exchange for the capital injection provided by James Wilson, said capital being essential for the continued operation of the business, James Wilson will receive a 51% controlling stake in Wilson & Sons Enterprise Corporation, including all current and future subsidiaries." I set the paper down. 51%, I said. "A controlling stake, which means the $120,000 I wired you Tuesday morning was not a gift from your son. It was a capital contribution from your majority owner. The room had the quality of a building in the instant after its support columns are removed. Everything still standing, nothing actually holding. My mother's mouth was open. Tyler's face was blank and gray, his eyes moving between me and my father as if searching for a coordinate that no longer existed. Aunt Carol looked like she'd stepped on something in the dark. My father went white. "That's a lie," he said, but his voice had lost its architecture. It was just sound, hollow and structural. "Look at your signature," I said calmly. "Look at the notary seal. This is your company to manage, Dad. It always has been, but it is my company to own. You've been running my business for 10 years. That was the word that did it. Running. "You tricked me," he roared, lurching to his feet, his face contorted, the volume filling the room like water filling a sealed space. "This was a setup, a con. You planned this from the beginning." "No," I said, and my voice was so quiet beneath his rage that he stopped just to hear it. "I never wanted to use this. I wanted to be your partner. I wanted to be your son, but you kept making me choose between being useful and being family. Tonight you'll finally understand those were never the same thing." I looked around the room. Vanessa was the one who moved first. Her mask dissolved, the soft-eyed victimhood replaced by something cold and ambitious. "This is insane," she said, standing, her voice flashing with fury. "You can't walk in here and declare you own everything. We'll get a lawyer. We'll fight this." I turned to her, fully, calmly. "First," I said, "you'd be fighting the lawyer who drafted the document. Second, who are you exactly? You are not a Wilson. You are not a signatory on any document in this folder. You are not a shareholder or a partner or an officer of any kind. In the legal and business context of this conversation, you are a guest. Your opinion is noted and discarded." The color left her face. She looked at Tyler, the desperate, expecting look of a woman who has always had someone step in. Tyler didn't move. He was staring at me with an expression I had never seen on his face in 30 years of knowing him. Fear, not of what I might do, of what he was seeing, maybe for the first time, that the brother he'd taken for granted his entire life had quietly and without announcement become someone he didn't know how to measure. Aunt Carol seized the moment of silence to perform her exit. She grabbed her handbag, announced that she clearly wasn't needed, and stalked out the front door without a goodbye, the cavalry retreating at full gallop. The door clicked shut, and then it was just us. I looked at the three of them on that sofa. My father deflated in his chair, my mother's tears gone ragged, Tyler staring at a middle distance that didn't exist. They looked like survivors on a life raft that had just sprung a leak. "Here is what happens now," I said, my voice steady and quiet. "The company will not be dissolved. The gift shop stays open. You," I nodded at my parents, "will be offered employment contracts, co-managers of the retail location, fair market salary, bi-weekly direct deposit subject to performance review." My mother's eyes flickered with something like hope. "The company will no longer fund your personal lives. The truck lease ends at the end of the month. The credit cards linked to my accounts are already canceled. You'll live within the means of your new income." I paused. "That's non-negotiable." I turned to my brother. "Tyler," I said, and my voice, just for a moment, softened at the edges. "You have no role in this business. The financial support I've provided you for your entire adult life is over, effective immediately. I genuinely wish you the best in building something of your own." I picked up my folder. I walked to the door. My mother's voice found me at the threshold, ragged and raw. "James, after everything we've done for you, how could you do this to your own family?" I stopped. I turned my head just enough to speak over my shoulder. "You're asking the wrong question, Mom," I said, my voice carrying the sad, final weight of a door closing on something that will not reopen. "The right question is, how could you do what you did to your own son? You told me I wasn't welcome. You told me I wasn't family. All I did tonight was finally believe you." I opened the door. I stepped into the cold. I didn't slam it. Rage leaves marks. I didn't want to leave marks. At the end of the block, 2 headlights blinked once, then twice. Emma. I got in my car and blinked mine back. The war was over. The first few weeks were the loudest silence I'd ever experienced. No calls, no texts, nothing. As if the Wilson family had collectively held its breath and decided to wait me out, hoping I would break first. I didn't break. I hired George, the store's longtime manager, 22 years on the floor, a man with the specific reliable competence of someone who simply shows up and does the work, as my operational contact. We set up weekly video calls. "It's different around here," George told me during our first call, keeping his voice low. "They come in, they do the work, they go home. No more 3-hour lunches on the company card. No more borrowing from the register for a weekend trip. Without the parasitic drain of my parents' personal spending running through the business accounts, the store's margins improved in the first month. By month 3, it was profitable for the first time in years." 6 weeks after the intervention, 2 signed employment contracts arrived by certified mail. No note, no apology, just signatures. Surrender. I booked a flight to Italy the following week. 2 weeks, just for me. No agenda, no schedule. I stood in the Roman Forum and felt old stone under my palms and thought about all the things that had been built to last and hadn't, and all the things that looked fragile and endured. In Florence, I walked into a small pottery studio on a Tuesday morning and paid for a 1-day class on a whim. I spent 4 hours with my hands in wet clay, making a pot that was clumsy and thick and completely impractical. I have never felt more accomplished. When I got home, I turned my spare bedroom into a studio. I bought canvases. I bought paint. The first paintings were raw and chaotic, all dark reds and sharp blacks, the visual vocabulary of a man processing a decade of accumulated damage. Then, gradually, other colors started appearing. Blues, greens, a yellow here and there, tentative and warm. About 8 months after that Friday night, a number I didn't recognize called my phone. I almost ignored it. "James, Tyler." His voice older somehow, scraped clean. "I got a new number," he said. "Prepaid. It's all I can afford right now." He told me he was stocking shelves at a grocery warehouse during the day, washing dishes at a steakhouse 3 nights a week, that his hands were raw and he was exhausted in a way he'd never experienced before. The specific exhaustion, I realized, of a man who has finally met his own life. He told me Vanessa had left 6 months earlier. The moment the money stopped, she'd informed him he had no ambition, packed her bags while he was on a shift, and taken the television. "The one I bought," I said. "Yeah," he said. "That one." A long pause. "James." His voice was thick with something I had never heard from him. "I get it now. All those years, you weren't just giving me money. You were giving me my life, and I just took it. I was an entitled, useless leech. And when you needed us, when you just wanted a little basic respect, I stood there and watched my girlfriend treat you like garbage and said nothing." He exhaled. "I'm sorry. I don't expect anything from you. I just needed to say it out loud. The apology I had stopped hoping for. It didn't undo 15 years. It didn't transform them into time I could reclaim, but it was a crack of light under a door I hadn't realized was still there. Keep at it," I told him. "The hard work gets easier." "Thanks, James," he whispered. "You too." I have spent most of my life measuring my worth by how much of myself I could give away. I believed that being a good son meant being boundaryless, that my needs were permanently secondary, that my dreams could always be deferred 1 more year, and my bank account was a utility, a public resource available on demand. The day my parents' text arrived, the day a woman I barely knew's discomfort outweighed my 35 years of membership in my own family, it felt like a death. It was. It was the death of the boy who believed that enough sacrifice would eventually purchase enough love, but deaths make room. Today, my passport has more stamps than it collected in the previous 34 years. The lopsided pottery from my Florence studio sits on my bookshelf, imperfect and whole. I have friends now who know me as James who makes terrible jokes and is surprisingly good at pub trivia, not James the family ATM. I learned something I should have been taught at 18, in that living room before I handed over my scholarship and my dream and the next decade of my financial life. You cannot buy your way into being loved. You cannot earn respect through unlimited generosity. You can only set your own value and refuse, clearly and without apology, to offer discounts, even to family, especially to family. The man in my mirror has new lines around his eyes. He is wearier than the boy in the old photographs. He has scars that didn't come with a warranty, but his eyes are clear. He stands up straight. He owns his own life. And when he pours his morning coffee now, he doesn't check his phone for summons. He just drinks it, slowly, while it's still hot.